Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are live from Casa del Jeezy for the SEC Focus podcast, and really just wanted to get on here. We're going to do a little preview of the Orange Bowl between Tennessee and Clemson. It is no secret where my fandom lies, obviously, with the Tennessee Volunteers, but going to break down a few things about both teams and kind of keys to victory. But I wanted to start it off first by talking about, Tennessee as far as where they started the season versus where they're ending the season, because I've seen a lot of negative talk really around all the opt-outs, and does Tennessee even have a chance in this game? And I think that we really got to look bigger picture. If you're a Tennessee fan, you got to really think back to where we were 2 years ago. You got to think back to the Jeremy Pruitt, the ending of that season. You got to even think back to the Greg Schiano. You got to think back to all those things when they had Mike Leach hired and then Mike Hamilton got fired. So you really got to put this all in perspective, and I think that'll help us kind of going into the new year. So first things first, for the first time in 20 years, Tennessee is going to be playing in a New Year's Six bowl that isn't taking place after the new year, but that's a story for another day. The other thing is, when you look back, even where Tennessee started this season, it's easy to look back now and say the season ended, in a way they didn't want it to. Obviously, inside that locker room, that team thought they had a chance to compete in the CFP, and they had it right there for the taking. They did let it slip away, but I think if you take a step back and really look at where they started, they didn't even start the preseason ranked in the top 25. There were 6 SEC teams ranked in the top 25. Tennessee was not one of them. So let's just go down that. Let's go down. Alabama was ranked first in the preseason. Georgia was ranked third. Texas A&M was ranked 6th. Arkansas was ranked 19th. Kentucky was ranked 20th. And Ole Miss was ranked 21st. So if you really want to keep things in perspective, look at it like this. You finished obviously behind Georgia. You had your shot at Georgia, did not come out. You go to Georgia, you're facing the Beast. They're number one for a reason. They're playing for back-to-back titles for a reason. You're not quite on that level yet. However, if you look at the other teams, you played Alabama, who was ranked higher and is currently ranked higher. Even though you beat them, right? You can say that you finished your season 10-2, better than them. A&M, very well documented where their season started, had one of the best recruiting class, number one recruiting class, ranked in the top 10, number 6, did not end well, 5-7, didn't even make a bowl game. Arkansas, coming off of a thriller triple overtime game against Kansas, finished their season at 7-6. So they were ranked 19th coming into the season. Had a lot of people saying they could compete for the West. Maybe they can even sneak in there and win the West. Didn't end that way. They end the regular season with a loss to Missouri. Pull out. They lost a humongous lead against Kansas. Almost lost that thing. What Kansas was thinking not putting the ball in Jalen Daniels' hand at the end, I will never figure out. However, come out with the win, 7-6. Kentucky. You played Kentucky. You beat Kentucky 44-6 at home, right? They started the season. A lot of people said that team is going to be the one competing with Georgia for the East. Didn't quite happen like that. Ole Miss, of all the saga that we saw with Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, is he going to Auburn? Is he not going to Auburn? This team started, 7-8-0, and then ended the season the way they did, getting blown out in their bowl game by Texas Tech after giving Lane Kiffin a huge extension, after giving Lane Kiffin a huge raise. So who's in better position right now? Is it Tennessee with Josh Heupel, or is it Ole Miss? Is it Arkansas? Is it Kentucky? Is it A&M? That's what you really got to compare yourself against, because those are the teams you were ranked behind coming into the season. Now let's reset. All of those teams that I just mentioned, other than obviously A&M because they didn't play in one, and the Georgia and the Alabama, of course, they've already played their bowl games. They were playing in lower-tier bowl games. Tennessee's playing in the Orange Bowl, like I said, for the first time in 20 years, playing in a New Year's Six bowl. So let's kind of break it down. Clemson, obviously ACC championship, benched their starting quarterback who had been there for a while. They put in Klubnik. He looked really, really good in the ACC championship game. They win that game kind of going away. Obviously, DJ transfers out, and it's kind of a new era. So we don't really know what to expect. We have one game sample size, but for him to come in and do what he did in the ACC championship game obviously speaks volumes to his talent as well as, the team in general. One thing I think that's going to be key for Clemson, obviously, is that they're going to have to pass the ball. Lucky for them, Tennessee's weakness all year long has been the secondary. They're 127th in pass defense. They've let up big plays, obviously, most famously against the South Carolina game when we absolutely saw every play seem like it was going for a touchdown, and I think they all did. But I don't want to talk about that. This is also the game that South Carolina, no matter who wins this game, South Carolina and Shane Beamer and those guys are going to be looking over there like we beat both of those teams. Not only do we beat both those teams, we trounced Tennessee when they came to our house. We beat our most bitter rival in Clemson. We kept them both from competing in the college football playoffs. And all that's true. I would just say to that Clemson and Tennessee got here by going completely different paths. Even though it looks the same, both had a chance. You got to look at it again. Perspective is a big thing from where they started. Clemson was ranked 4th coming into the season. They had high expectations. They were expected to be in the Final Four, and then it didn't play out exactly like that. They won some ugly games, won some close games, and then end up losing to South Carolina, and it ruins their chances too. But don't forget, if South Carolina doesn't beat Clemson, we're talking about those guys getting the shot at Georgia and not Ohio State, which we'll get into that matchup on a different show. So again, I think when you look at that, obviously Klubnik, really talented quarterback. They have some talented receivers. Tennessee, 127th in pass defense. They've allowed 450 yards in the air 3 times this season. So for Tennessee, you obviously have to figure out a way. And I think at this point in the season, you play 12 games on your 13th game. Are you going to figure out the secondary? Most likely not. So it kind of is what it is there. Another thing that Clemson really likes to do, they run the ball extremely well. Now, that actually happens to be one of the things that Tennessee does defend well. They're really good at stopping the run. Now, people are going to point out a lot of opt-outs going into this game for Tennessee, and that is where I think is the biggest unknown, right? Tennessee is going to be without Hendon Hooker, obviously, with the ACL injury against South Carolina. They're going to be without Jalen Hyatt, who opted for the NFL draft in preparation. Cedric Tillman also opted out. One thing that's not getting talked about enough, and I feel like it's going to be a huge thing, and we actually saw it, Jeremy Banks opting out. And we saw Jeremy Banks famously did not play in the South Carolina game, and the defense looked even worse than it did when he wasn't there. So Tennessee, a lot has been made that their defense is bad, their defense is bad, their defense is bad. And I will say that they have been bad in spots, but they had 20 takeaways on the year. They're +9 in the turnover margin. That's what you want to see. They're 5th in the SEC in scoring defense. So it's not like this defense just was without any pizzazz. These guys did force turnovers. These guys didn't allow a lot of points. You call it a bend but don't break. Obviously, giving up the 63 against South Carolina really hurt their stats. But the opt-outs, obviously, on the Clemson side, Miles Murphy, obviously really talented guy. He opted out to prepare for the NFL draft as well as linebacker Trenton Murphy. He didn't opt out. He's injured. He won't be playing in the game as well. So I think that for the key for Clemson on offense is to get the passing game going, because I don't think they can rely as much on the run offense as they have this year. That's the one spot that Tennessee seems to do well in on defense. And for Tennessee offensively, big key to this game, obviously without Hendon Hooker, Joe Milton is going to be, starting the game. They have to score fast. They have to score early and often. One of the things that we saw about Tennessee when they were really rolling, they were able to get a lead and just continue to punch teams in the mouth. That's going to have to be the way they go at this, but they can't get out of what they do. They're going to go for some big plays, but they have to stay balanced. People looked at Tennessee this year and thought all they really do is pass the ball. They don't. They're one of the most balanced teams in the country, and I think that you'll continue to see that. The game plan for good, bad, or indifferent is not going to change. Joe Milton is going to be airing it out. They call him Bazooka Joe for a reason. He's going to be looking for guys like Brew McCoy. He's going to be looking for guys like Squirrel White. He is going to be looking for Keaton. And I think the receiving core is really talented. Obviously, you're not going to be able to replace guys like Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman with just anybody. But I think the receiving core is talented enough, and we've seen that Joe Milton and Squirrel White seem to have a really good connection, hit on some big plays against Vanderbilt. The rushing attack against Vanderbilt was obviously elite. The defense pitched to shutout. This is a different animal. You're not playing Vanderbilt this time. You're playing Clemson. If you look at this whole thing from a talent perspective, Clemson has the advantage. They might have even had the advantage if Tennessee was at full strength. What Dabo has been able to build at Clemson has been remarkable. Even people will say that they play in the ACC, but we've seen them play the SEC in national title games. We've seen them go 2-2. They beat Alabama twice for national championships. Obviously, they lost to LSU, which by a lot of people's opinions was the greatest LSU. That's the greatest college football team to ever put on the field, right? If not the best, one of the best. So Chris says, give us your thoughts on Clemson moving to Klubnik after he showed out coming off the bench. Can he sustain what he did in the ACC championship game? Yeah, Chris, I kind of addressed that coming in. I think that he can. What really was a spark, Klubnik coming in, it wasn't just his offensive production. I think he threw for about 280 yards, a couple scores. It was a spark on both sides. Both sides of the ball looked energized once he came in. It was almost like when Cade was in, both sides just felt more confident. The defense was more on its toes. Not that the defense has been bad, because they have actually been really good, on the season. They've held 8 opponents to less than 20 points. Obviously, Tennessee, in 10 of their games, they've scored 38 or more. So I was going to do a whole breakdown of position by position and offensive numbers versus defensive numbers. But I think that and this is the norm in college football, right? As we go into it and you have so many guys missing, number one, when you're missing what should have been a Heisman finalist in Hendon Hooker, when you're missing what was the best receiver in the country in Jalen Hyatt, when you're missing another guy that's a first or second round draft pick in Tillman, all those offensive numbers, the number one offense in the nation, that's great to point out for Tennessee, but it really doesn't matter going into this game, because while the game plan will be the same, the players are going to be different, and we have to see, can Joe Milton can he do what Hendon Hooker was doing? I do like the fact that we have an experienced guy, an older guy, another older guy, because Hendon Hooker's like 25. Joe Milton is not without experience. He just doesn't have a lot of starting experience, and this is not the way that anybody wanted to get it. But again, kind of breaking that down, the key to the game for me, if I could just break it down in a sentence for Tennessee, it's play fast, hit big plays early, and stay balanced. Don't fall so in love with the big, deep bomb, and it's easy to do because Joe Milton he can throw it. He can throw it 100 yards easily. And for Clemson, I think that the key for them is going to just stick to the formula, stick to what you do. They're going to try to run the ball. They're also going to try to stay balanced. They're going to try to hit big plays. But my concern for Clemson is, are they going to fall in love with the big play because they see that Tennessee has some vulnerabilities in the secondary? Because they do, absolutely do have some vulnerabilities. The passing game would definitely be the strength for Clemson. While on paper, you're going to look at it and say the Tennessee secondary has given up a lot of big plays. But I think that, again, 20 takeaways plus 9 in turnovers. It's not that Tennessee's defense has not been opportunistic, because they have. 5th in the SEC in scoring defense. So it's been a bend but don't break. And obviously some games they've looked a lot better than others. Sometimes injuries happen. A sad part of the game. Who gets hurt worse if the starting quarterback goes out for either team? That comes from Chris Keenhold as well. I would have to say Tennessee probably, because they just don't know who that third string is. Obviously, there's some talk that they would have Tavon Jackson back and he'll be available. And if that's true, I feel a lot better. But I think that Clemson, just looking at it, and I looked at the blue chip talent and guys they have on the roster, Clemson just has so many 4 and 5 stars. What Dabo has been able to do there, he has really recruited on an SEC type level. He's recruited on an Alabama and a Georgia and LSU level and Ohio State level. So what he's been able to do, has just been phenomenal in recruiting and in winning. When you look at Dabo, 161 and 38 since he's been the head coach at Clemson, 2 national championships. He's 2-2 in national championships. Obviously went back to the CFP last year, got blown out by Ohio State. But I mean, was that last year or the year before last? Either way, the guy's been phenomenal. So kind of wrapping that back, don't want to spend a whole lot of time on here today. Just kind of wanted to give that keys to the game. I think the key, if you point out, an X factor, obviously I think it's probably a cheap take, but the X factor for both teams is going to be the quarterback position. Can Joe Milton be accurate with his long throws? We know that he can throw the ball 100 yards in the air effortlessly, but can he be accurate? Can he keep it on the field? Can he give his receivers a chance to catch the ball? And I think if he can do that, Tennessee has a chance in this game. I think for Clemson, it's going to be, can he, like Chris said, can he maintain the success that he saw in the ACC championship game? We have no reason to think that he can't with Tennessee's secondary, but I think that when you get some pressure on the defensive line, Tennessee has been this year, obviously, again, good against the run, and they've managed to get some pressure on quarterbacks. Not high up there in sacks, but I think the key for them isn't necessarily going to be the sacks. Is can you move him off of his spots? Can you make him move around in the pockets and hopefully force a young quarterback into mistakes? So that's kind of where it is for me. But again, the real message, I think that when I started prepping for the show, I had a whole lot more. I was going to dive into some real numbers and kind of what I thought, but it really boiled back down to me as perspective. How did both teams get here? When you look at it, Clemson, 4th coming into the season, the preseason top 25, AP 4th, Tennessee unranked behind 6 other SEC teams. So if you're a Tennessee fan and you're looking at this season as a whole, no matter what happens tonight at 7 o'clock, you have to look at this like this was a win on the year. Tennessee came in unranked. They were able to beat your biggest rivals this year, other than Georgia. That game was definitely not that close, even the final score. But 10-2, playing against Clemson in the Orange Bowl, even with the opt-outs, don't get caught up in that minutia of who opted out and what if we get blown out tonight against Clemson. You got to look at it from a big picture. What Josh Heupel has been able to do in 2 years has been remarkable. This guy took over a really, really, really difficult position. You had obviously the losing seasons under Jeremy Pruitt. You had NCAA sanctions against Tennessee, an investigation, all that other stuff. And all the guy did was last year, win 7 games. This year, won 10 games going to the Orange Bowl. When I think the biggest test, more important than tonight, he's bringing in another top 10 class, or he's bringing in his first top 10 class actually at Tennessee, is what can he do in year 3? What can he do when it's all his players? That's what I want to see. That's what matters more to me than the outcome of tonight. Obviously, I want Tennessee to win. I think Tennessee will compete tonight. I don't think it'll be a blowout. If I had to pick a winner, I would say Clemson has the advantage. They only really have one opt-out of note. It's a big one. It's Miles Murphy, obviously, on the defensive line for Clemson. But I think that if I had to give one of the teams, the slight edge, or maybe even a decided edge, I would say it's Clemson, and I would say it's going to be something like 35-27, 35-30, something like that. Obviously, I hope I'm wrong. I hope people get to run this tape back and say, you were absolutely wrong. Tennessee won, go Big Orange. I hope I'm wrong. That's just what I see, but it won't even matter. The outcome of tonight, in my opinion, is not the most important thing. The outcome is looking at this thing like a whole in the big picture. So for SEC Jeezy and SEC Focus podcast page, SEC Focus Facebook page, if you haven't got a chance to go like us on Facebook, please do that now. We're kind of building something special over there on the Facebook page. We want high-quality SEC content of all kinds: football, basketball, baseball, softball, volleyball. We want it all over there. Rowing, swimming, golfing, it doesn't matter. If it's SEC related, and sometimes even if it's not, we want it on our Facebook page. So visit us there. But for now, I'll see you guys tonight. Go Big Orange. I'm out.